So we go to the final discussion. We have nearly half an hour left. And we haven't heard much of, let's say, the publishing companies, the publishers themselves. Perhaps we have, but they haven't identified themselves. I don't know. To make up for this, we have asked two people from this sphere to be here on the stage as well. Max Haring of Springer Publishing. He's all the way in the back, but welcome, Max Haring. And we've seen it before this morning in a presentation of PLOSone, Nicola Stead. Hi, we hadn't met.
Hi, Max.
Pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Hi, Max.
Okay, obviously there's one party not on the couch. And I know it's hard to talk about colleagues, but would you have liked to have Elsevier alongside you on the bench?
Absolutely.
Yes?
Yes.
Do you have any contact?
At Elsevier?
Yes?
No.
No? No.
It's not something I work, somebody I work with regularly. No. I know people who kind of switched from other publishers to work with Elsevier and the other way around.
Right.
That's about it.
Okay. But being colleagues, you must be following what they're doing in the field quite...
Yes,
nearly.
Yes.
You've made a deal. We've heard the word a few times this morning already, the Springer deal. Mm-hmm. Could you explain in lay terms, please, what this Springer deal is supposed to mean?
Yes, the Springer deal allows the universities in the Netherlands to use their subscription money towards open access publication.
Yes.
So they get access to all the content at Springer, and the deal allows the researchers to publish in an open access journal at Springer, included in the package. So no extra costs for the author.
There's no extra cost, because that's the...
It's paid for from the package, yes.
Yes. Was it a hard deal to forge for Springer?
I wasn't part of the discussions. I believe it was an interesting deal, definitely, and we're happy that it is here.
Okay. The deal, what's the fun? Who was involved in the negotiations? You were.
No, I wasn't.
No, but you heard something. Okay, can I have a mic with Jan Menglers, please? I'm just curious. These negotiations,
No, I wasn't part of the negotitions.
No, but you heard some things about it.
Of course, in the general board of the VSNU, where all the presidents of the universities gather.
Yes.
Two of us did the negotiations, Koen Becking and Gerard Meijer from
yes.
the University of Tilburg, respectively, Nijmegen. And we got feedback of these negotiations, and I think they went very well. Because I laughed because you said, were they tough negotiations? And I think they still were a bit of tough but fair.
Yes, like they should be.
Like they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And the basics is that although publishers make an enormous amount of profit, nevertheless, and the increase of money in the recent years is substantial for all the universities and the libraries to pay for that. The deal was, if we don't have an increase, can we have all the positive aspects of having open access and having all the regular contracts as well. And that was the final outcome of the deal, and we all were very pleased by that. We all thought that that would be kind of a breakthrough for the others. Nevertheless, we have to consider that we are a very small country. We still are united. The universities are still united in this aspect, which also is a kind of an aspect that is quite tough to do, because if you have, you should stay united in this case, and it would be interesting if Europe would be united as well, which all the other countries also don't do as easy as that. So
okay, but we heard Norda talking about uniting Europe on this
that is true, and it would be nice if all the countries would do so, but I think that France already has taken a contract for 5 years with Elsevier, although we are still in negotiations. So I think, and thereby Springer is an example to go the way forward with the publishers.
Yes. We'll get to PLOSone in a second, okay? You've done your talking. Not really. But Springer is the point I'd like to focus on now. this open access issue, has it been on your desk for a long time? I mean, is this a long history of no to yes?
Absolutely. Springer has open access for at least the last decade and probably longer. We've had open access offerings, different kinds of offerings. We were the first ones to offer the hybrid journals. So having an open access publication in a subscription journal. And then compensate the subscription prices to match the number of open access articles.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you've been thinking a long time about these kinds of issues. Is open access a threat to scientific publishing?
No, it's a big opportunity. It takes
could you explain what the opportunity is then?
It takes away a lot of I mean, publishing is really, it's not about locking up articles and trying to get as few people to read them as possible. It's really about reaching out. Some think, yes. But open access definitely shows the other way. And it is really all about, we want our articles to be read by as many people as we can and to be cited by as many people as we can. And we want to offer services to researchers that help them advance their science and advance their careers.
Yes.
And open access is a big step in that.
Okay. You seem to be in favor of hybrid publishing models. Why is that?
Hybrid is from a researcher's perspective, hybrid is the easiest, the most convenient way to comply with mandates and still publish in the journals that people know and people like and have been publishing in for years.
So you can take whatever you like.
Yes, you can take the best of both worlds. Have an established journal, established editorial board, and all the quality that comes with that, and have all the benefits of open access.
Okay. At PLOSone, there's a radical choice for one model. It's all open access. This hybrid, does that? He tells us it's favorable in some situations as well. Never tried that?
No, I mean, all our journals haven't existed as subscription journals to begin with. They've all been established as open access, and we decided to keep that way. We feel that subscription or hybrid journals, it can sometimes get confusing over the copyright. And for example, in an open access journal, we just have one copyright, CC-BY. Then there's no confusions, there's one payment, it's very transparent where the money is going. So I mean, I can't really comment very much because we don't have hybrid journals.
The point, you make a good point, because these copyrights seem to be different in one model from the other. That's not true? No?
No, open access paper is an open access paper.
But I think there is sometimes a problem, and not necessarily on Springer journals, but I do know that, for example, in Elsevier journals, you do have different options for copyright. So you can have CC-BY, CC-BY non-commercial. And for example, PLOS very much believes that the best Creative Commons license is CC-BY or CC-BY 0, which is even more open than the CC-BY. And it's not necessarily wrong, but it can get confusing. And for example, I know in the UK, some funding agencies are very strict on the use of CC-BY. And it can get into a situation where if it's not entirely clear, it is difficult. And that's one small benefit of just having one size-fits-all approach and not providing options.
Yes. Yes, Daniel. You should have kept your headset.
Sorry, just a question. So, because you say the financial situation is very transparent in terms of what I pay, I always find it extremely transparent. I'm also an editor at Frontiers, which is also a big open access journal in psychology. It's the biggest open access journal, and even as an editor, I have no idea why people have to continue to pay so much money for open access journals. Now you have alternatives like PeerJ, for example, which has a different financial situation where you pay $99 and then you can publish one article a year for the rest of your life. I think that's pretty cheap. And now I'm starting to wonder, is it so transparent?
No, I mean, I would agree with you that there is still some way to go in terms of making it fully transparent as to what exactly an APC pays for. I think it's more transparent than perhaps a subscription model, especially in cases where APCs can be higher in maybe a hybrid journal. That's not always the case for every hybrid journal, but it's moving in a more transparent direction.
Talking about transparency, I've on my notes here, I have written Springer $3,000, PLOSone $2,900, more or less the same, as the article handling costs. Is that a figure that sounds true?
I don't know the dollar amount by heart, but somewhere there, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Is that an open figure? I mean, can everyone understand why this much money is involved in processing a scientific article?
So there is no. If you go and look on our website for a breakdown of the costs, it won't be there. It's not there.
Wouldn't that be a good idea?
It would absolutely be a good idea. Yes. What it does offer is offers a choice to also on a price level compare different journals. And of course, they never knew. They never knew how much a subscription to a particular journal cost. So they all wanted to read that journal. Maybe it was outrageously expensive and the papers were not that good. Yeah. So open access does allow authors to also, on the price point, make a comparison between journals.
I'm not sure if that would make any difference on an individual level. Would you suspect people would take the cheap ones?
I think it's price versus quality. What can a journal offer an author in benefits, and what can what does an author wants to pay for that?
Yeah. Okay. Anthony Myers?
Well, there has been research into article processing costs in open access journals. The average is roughly 790 euros, which is very less than the regular price at subscription journals. And then journals in biomedicine are much more expensive than journals in the social sciences and humanities, and high impact journals are also more expensive. That has nothing to do with the article processing cost, because that is roughly the same. It has to do with the reputation of the journal. What I do not understand from this thesis, the authors prefer hybrid open access. I would rather think publishers prefer hybrid open access, because in addition to the subscription price, you get an article processing cost for open access articles. Or are you diminishing your subscription rates for the number of articles?
Yes, we are.
And is that amount of money sent back to the universities?
That's actually that's a very transparent calculation. We just look at the percentage of open access articles in a particular journal, and then we'll lower the subscription price for that journal with the same percentage.
Yeah, but then worldwide, everybody pays for that, right? It's.
How do you mean?
If you lower the subscription rate...
No, people worldwide pay for the subscription articles, but not for the open access articles in Springer journals.
Yes.
Okay, so if half of the articles in a certain journal are being published open access, the price will be halved?
Yes.
Okay, will this be upfront? I mean, in the big deal, for instance?
So it will be factored into the deals we have with individual universities, yes. But the calculation is transparent, and we offer that information to the librarians.
Right. Right. So there's no obstacle, but also no incentive to go to open access. It's just
there are many incentives to go open access because of the reuse rights and the available downloads for everybody else. For a researcher, they definitely should go open access.
Okay. What's the biggest journal I know in Springer Publishing House?
The biggest journal?
I mean, the biggest title.
I honestly, I don't know.
No?
No. We have many journals. We have 2,500 journals. I don't know. 2,500 journals.
Wow.
Roughly.
I can imagine you can't name one. Going to PLOSone, or PLOS, I might say, you have 6, 7 titles?
Yes, so we have 7 titles. We have 6 community journals and PLOSone.
Yes.
So it's a much smaller.
Why were the specific subjects of these journals chosen in the way they are? I mean, PLOS Biology is a clear one, but there are some, I'm not quite sure why that would be something for a specific journal.
To be honest.
Tropical diseases.
Neglected tropical diseases. Yes. So I think that so we have PLOS Medicine and PLOS Biology, which have an in-house editorial staff, and the rest are community-driven journals.
Yes.
Where there is a need for publishing in those areas. And for example, neglected tropical diseases is also an area of research that happens in perhaps not European countries, and people who need access to that research would greatly benefit from open access. Why those specific areas, I'm not entirely sure. I know, for example, I think NTDs was established with funding from the Bill Gates Foundation
Yes.
because of this need to have access to open research for people working in countries that can't afford subscriptions.
Yes. But there's not, let's say, some political views involved in which subjects should be covered by open access journals from the PLOS family?
No, I don't believe so. And I think PLOSone has been one of the latest ones. I think the only journal that was launched by PLOS after PLOSone was Neglected Tropical Diseases. And I think very much with the creation of PLOSone, which offers a home for research across the breadth of science.
Yes.
That's why we're not sort of creating more journals that, because you could endlessly go on, create another open access journal for a very specific field, but we feel that PLOSone fits a lot of those areas now.
Okay, let's go to another subject. We've heard quite some talk about the golden open access versus green. There's perhaps even other colors involved, I'm not quite sure. For Springer, is there a difference between these several possibilities?
Well, gold is publishing with Springer, and green is publishing elsewhere.
Okay.
And possibly with the publication at Springer, and then the manuscript is deposited on a website somewhere. That's the green publication.
Yeah.
And then there's the article at Springer, and it could be gold. But if the article is published open access with Springer, which means gold, you don't need the green anymore.
Right. But you don't make it's always the same with the open access publishing right now at Springer.
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
We can call it gold.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm not sure. Leo Weyers is waving. Yeah, sure. The only problem is you're so far away. It takes ages to get there. Okay, Leo.
Thank you. Well, I was wondering if I'm an author these days and I have finalized my article and I'm considering to publish that article in an open access journal. I'm working with a Dutch university who has a Springer deal. Then I can make a choice and publish my article for free in the Springer journal and for a price in a PLOS journal. There we still have to pay. It's part of my budget, my research budget.
Yes.
But anyway, I would say that's a big distortion of the market. And why is that? Because the library is prepared to pay for the Springer journals, but is not prepared to pay for the PLOS journals. Isn't that strange? Shouldn't PLOS not require that the library also is prepared to pay for the articles that are published in PLOS, so that we have a level playing field again?
Yes. So that's a question for Nicola?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes, I mean, it is a difficult situation. I'm not sure quite what PLOS can do about that. I mean, I think it is very interesting to look at the way subscriptions with libraries are progressing in offering subscriptions to have APCs paid for not on an article basis, but more as an institution. I personally am not involved in the financial side of PLOS. They make a quite clear distinction of keeping editorial and financial quite separate. So it's not something that I'm involved in directly. But we are seeing this trend moving that way, and it is, I think, something libraries are interested in.
Yes. Okay, but I'd like to get back to Leo Weyers for a second. Yeah. The point you're making is there's a market distortion in a sense. But who is distorting the market? Could you explain that? Where is it coming from?
Well, actually, the libraries do, because they are prepared to pay the price for certain publishers,
yes,
preferred publishers, or whatever you call them, and they are not prepared to do the same for other publishers.
Yes.
So either way, or they should pay for all publishers, and then you have no market, because then for the authors it is free again,
yes,
as it was in the old subscription world. There
Yes.
it was free for them again. And they didn't matter about the price. They didn't know about the price. So there will not be a market at all. Or libraries should, at the end of the day, charge the authors for the price they have prepaid to Springer.
Yes.
Then they should, at the end of the year, for example, charge them for that. So
Yes.
either way, but this is a strange situation what we have now.
Okay, well, I'm pretty sure we have people from the library world right here. They're already waving. You have to run again, but still, I could have a reaction on this because there seems to be a non-level playing field.
I don't agree to that.
Okay.
I think libraries are prepared to close a big deal with Public Library of Science. So that's the first step.
Has it been tried?
There are talks going on, but it's about closing a big deal, just like we did with Springer.
But they only have 7 titles, so it's not that big.
Well, no. The second one is that libraries indeed negotiated subscriptions until now, but I think it's also a matter of universities being prepared to spend money on open access journals, and that's why I don't agree with Leo, because it's a matter of the universities themselves and VSNU, etc.
Can we have the mic at Jan Mengeles for a second? Well, either way,
our head of library should be the one who would be able to express that. Maybe that's for sure that it's up to the universities to decide how they will spend the money and how they will instruct their libraries to make these negotiations. That's right. To make it an equally or a level playing field, the other mention that was made earlier, to charge back from the library cost to the individual researchers, either cost, which will be also a difficulty, I think. So I'm not out of it. I have no clear answer on how far open access will be involved in the, let's say, big deal contracts from the libraries in this case. I'm not sure how we do that ourselves.
I think here's the expert.
Yes. Perhaps you can stand up and...
I'm Sean Victor. I'm not an expert, I guess, but I think what the libraries did was paying for the right to read. And now we are changing to the fact that the author has to pay to publish their article. So there is a shift. And what I think about the Springer deal, that is my personal point of view, we paid for the right to read the Springer articles. And now we have a deal, we pay the same, and that's not quite true. We pay a bit more to pay off the article publication cost. So it didn't get cheaper, it got more costly. And that's what I think it worries me.
Yes.
May I offer another view on this?
Yes, please.
So the
as long as it's true.
So the researcher now, with the new deal, can publish an open access paper with Springer,
yes.
Included in the general subscription price. And assuming that the funding body of that particular research also had an open access fund available, that money is still there for another open access publication. So there are 2 open access publications where normally the funds maybe have reached only 1. Or you can choose to spend that money in a different way, adding to the research budget, for instance.
Okay. I'd like to get back to these amounts that were mentioned, the $2,900, $3,000. True or not, it's the ballpark we're talking, right?
Yes.
You mentioned there's been studies suggesting that the real cost would be somewhere around $700 or $800.
That's the average for open access journals.
That's the average for open access journals.
Yeah.
But if I'm correct, they do the same work like
that's what I think.
Commercial subscription magazines, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So where's the difference? Why is that?
Different levels of quality are offered by different journals. It's very easy to start your own open access journal platform, journal publisher. There is free software, open source software you can download, install on the computer, and there is your publication company.
Well, he's planning to.
And you can choose the amount of money you want to charge to the authors, wherever you want it.
Yes.
And there are journals or publishers that offer very little services for very little money. And then there are publishers that offer a lot of service for a bit more money.
Yes.
But how do you explain then that high-impact journals charge more and biomedical journals charge more than journals in other domains?
So high-impact journals have very high rejection rates. They reject many more papers than they actually accept for publication.
Which is work as well.
Which is work as well. You have to read all those papers. You have to take them through the process. You have to. There is someone at Springer. We have a team of people checking every manuscript to see all the elements are there. If people say there are 5 figures, they will count the number of figures. If there's only 4, go back to the authors. And that's all before the manuscript reaches the academic editors. The editorial boards. So that's all work that needs to be done. And we also do that for the papers that aren't accepted and don't bring any revenue.
Okay. Would that be the mechanism as to why PLOS and PLOSone is more or less in the same cost region?
Well, actually, so our 6 journals are in the similar sort of region, $2,000 something, whereas PLOSone is actually lower than that.
Okay.
It's closer to $1,000.
Yes. But still, more or less the same.
Yes. And basically, there are differences in the editorial processes and the services offered between those 6 journals and PLOSone, which account for the differences. For example, on the 6 journals, we offer copy editing as an in-house service, whereas in PLOSone, we don't offer that as a service. I would agree with Max that there are a lot of other services that are added to the peer review process. I mentioned some earlier that we have a lot of technical checks which include things like, are all the files present when they say the supplementary file, is the supplementary file there? Also the additional checks that happen by the in-house editorial staff. For example, the ethics checks, things, the clinical trials. And earlier there was mention of the Bohannon Sting paper, and actually that was rejected by PLOSone as a result of technical checks on cell line provenance. So there are these other checks that can help get rid of papers that don't meet our quality standards.
But it's pre-processing.
And this pre-processing, and it's all work, and it needs to be paid for. And partly, going back to the idea that peer reviewers are being overwhelmed, part of these technical checks can help remove that burden before it even gets to that stage. But that all costs money, which is...
Getting back to Springer again, I asked before, what would the situation be in 5 years? That was in a general sense, what will be the situation on open access publishing. Let's specify it somewhat more to Springer. You say authors prefer hybrid open access, perhaps publishers do, I'm not sure. But is there a trend? Are there any figures suggesting that open access is upcoming? Or?
Absolutely, yes. There are journals that year on year increase the number of hybrid open access articles in the journal. And I can see that reach a point where it doesn't make sense to offer it as a subscription journal anymore, because it effectively became almost an open access journal, except for maybe 10% that we can easily give discounts if people can't pay the price.
That's exactly the point where I was trying to get. That there is a shifting point where it doesn't make sense to be a subscription journal anymore. And you mentioned 10%. Is that by coincidence, or is that a figure you actually use in practice?
No, that's not a figure we use. That's case by case basis. It makes a lot of difference if a journal publishes 1,000 papers every year, and then 10% of only publishes 25 papers, and then 10%.
Right.
But it's definitely something we look at for each individual journal, if it makes sense to change it into a fully open access journal. Yes.
And in terms of being a company making profit, etc., it wouldn't make any difference, would it?
No.
So why not go there at once?
Because then we would We would lose the subscription revenue, and we are not sure that people will still choose for those journals if it's an open access journal.
You have the names.
In Western Europe, open access is established, and people can get money to pay for the publication.
Yes.
It's a lot less obvious in China, for instance, or in other countries, or even in the United States. It's much more difficult to get funding for an open access publication.
So what you're doing now is turning it around and saying subscription journals are a possibility for some academics to publish instead of open access because they couldn't pay it?
Because they don't have access to open access funding, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so there's benefits in that sense to subscriptions
so if we would switch all the journals, those authors wouldn't have a place to publish their work, at least not with Springer. That's obviously not something we'd like to
But then again, the problem with subscription journals would still be that the same people wouldn't be able to read their own work. They wouldn't have access to these magazines if they...
There's a possibility, yes.
Yeah, okay. Again, this question, what will be the situation in 5 years? Let's start with Nicola. You have 7 titles now. We tried to count them, but it's more or less 7, 7.5, 6.5, I don't know. More titles, less. What would be the outlook in 5 years for PLOS?
Well, I wouldn't say more titles.
Yeah.
I think the focus is now shifting more away from whether or not open access works. I think it does work. And I'm looking more to the way we publish, you know, is the manuscript still the best way to get research out there? And I would envision sort of more understanding of the data, availability. I think that's where we're going, and changing the way peer review happens. I would see that in a 5-year frame. But.
Okay, interesting. So there might be some quite new developments coming from PLOS, for instance.
I mean, I don't know. This is what I would see as...
You would like to see that.
I would see it as a logical progression, having established that open access works. But, you know, 5 years is a long time, and anything can happen in them. But that's where I see the field at the moment. It would make sense.
To end with Max, you've closed this big deal in which open access is an integral part. Does that bring rest to the situation? Is there a quiet and calm now, or will there be new developments as well?
No, it is actually, it gives us the interesting challenge of now that there is no barrier for authors to choose open access with Springer.
Yeah.
So we better make sure that people do choose the open access with Springer, and we make all our services as good as we can, and really help authors, help researchers publish their work in an efficient, of course, but also in a high quality way, and get the most out of their publication.
Yes. We have a few minutes for a few questions. Why not? Go ahead.
Having followed today's discussion about open access, I'm beginning to wonder, what is the problem with open access? All publishers present here today do offer a hybrid journal version. They offer open access. There are a lot of open access publishers. Frontiers is named also.
Yeah.
So every researcher can publish his work, his manuscript, in open access. What's the problem?
Well, I heard some people saying it's not going fast enough. For instance, Jos Engelen. Perhaps you can give him the mic for a second. What's the problem, Jos?
No, the problem was that there were not enough journals that offered the opportunity to publish in open access. That is changing, as we now hear. And temporarily you have to tweak the market a little bit, as I understood. That is fine. No, now the scientists, of course, they should agree that this is worthwhile and make an effort if they do not yet publish open access because they are used to their journals. That they should look whether they can make the move. That's all. And I think I agree the discussion today was much towards open access. But I think if you make a complete inventory of all scientific activities, that the situation is probably not as rosy as the impression you got today. But maybe there is a pleasant surprise there. I will do we will make an inventory for you.
Okay, thank you, Jos Engelen. And thank you, Max Haring, of course, and Nicola Stead again. Thank you. Which brings us to the closing remarks from my side here. I think although it has been rosy in a sense, I think we've had quite some new and nice insights in the problems and the opportunities of open access publishing and the reasons for open science, for instance, to be a real possibility. We've also seen many questions coming out. How would I do? How should my university do? What's the role of the funding agencies? And do I trust or do not trust this publishing house, for instance? I'm sure some of it will help you find your way in this rather difficult field. And it's now time to have some drinks and snacks outside here. I thank you so much for being here, for taking part in the discussions. I thank again all the speakers and guests we had, and I hope to see you some other time. Thank you.